Good afternoon, members of the press. Good afternoon, Bermuda. The government published the Airport Development Agreement, otherwise known as the ADA, on the parliamentary website last year. More recently, much has been made about the absence of specific schedules from the published material. The schedules include commercially sensitive information that we cannot release while we are still in negotiations with CCC and ACON. Parts of the ADA, which I signed last summer, bind us to keep such sensitive information confidential. It is for the benefit of all parties concerned. Releasing those schedules, contrary to our agreement, would jeopardize Bermuda's reputation as a responsible and reliable business partner. Once the parties reach a final agreement, then all documents that relate to our agreement can, should, and will be made public. I was chairman of the Public Accounts Committee for 5 years. I am well aware of established procedures. I know how this standing committee of the House of Assembly is supposed to work. During my tenure, we inaugurated public meetings and issued summonses, including one to a sitting minister. But they were issued with the consensus of the bipartisan committee itself, not by the chairman alone. As the most recent summonses were written and delivered by the chairman without prior committee approval, they are not valid. With regard to the schedules, I need to reiterate that breaching the business agreements of confidentiality would be a serious matter for Bermuda, its reputation, and the public interest. The information will be made public once the parties have a final agreement. With those brief comments, I'm willing to answer any questions, and of course I have the Attorney General here to answer any questions of a legal nature.
Did this play any factor in the non-attendance of the OBA ministers yesterday at the back meeting?
Yes.
So when Cole Simon said yesterday that everyone had separate business arrangements and couldn't attend, was that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate too. But you know, Mr. Manders had been summoned. We didn't think the summons was valid. Some of the members had business elsewhere, so there was no point in having that meeting. And so they had other things they had to do. But you know, there didn't seem to be sufficient notice. I wasn't sure what the notice period was, but there's a combination of factors. But certainly the fact that the summons in the Ministry of Finance's view is not valid was part of that reason.
What will happen next Thursday when the same situation evolves?
I don't know. Maybe AG can comment on that.
Well, you know, from a legal point of view, as the Minister of Finance has said, there are two separate issues. One is the validity of the summons that was issued, and the other one is whether or not, because of the public interest immunity, the confidentiality, whether that information should be released in any case. So those two issues will have to be addressed whenever the committee meets.
So under no situation are you going to resolve or release any of these scheduled details at this time until further negotiations?
Well, the likelihood is that once the issue is to the validity of the summons, what we say is that the committee should have a vote and a resolution whether or not to issue a summons. That important step never took place. Once that step takes place, the committee will either authorize the issue of summons or not. If there is no summons, the summons will go away. If there is a summons, then we will go back to the position that we believe at this point in time there's public interest immunity from releasing the schedules. So we would say it's premature at this point in time to be releasing those schedules. If we were to arrive at that position and there were no agreement, then I guess that's why the courts are there to litigate that issue.
Thank you. Minister, the final decision on how much it will cost and the ramifications, therefore, are being waited for quite expectantly by issues and people overseas as well as locally. I know you're aware of that.
Indeed.
What kind of news can you give them about the nearness of the decision on those important figures?
Well, we are plodding away. It's a complex project, and we are doing the kind of due diligence on costs that are really unprecedented. Because it is a sole source, we are demanding to see details of the costing of ACON that are way in excess of what you would normally do in a tendered process. If the contract was tendered, then we would have the right to look at some of the cost structures of the bidders. But the winning, it really would be sort of dependent on the winning bidder. But under these circumstances, we are demanding a lot more detail of ACON, their costs, and their plans on how they're going to go forward. So we're working through all of these issues at the moment. We're also working through the issue of providing the report to the UK government. That's a requirement in the entrustment letter. All these things are ongoing at the moment. But let me sort of put this in layman terms, in terms of this, the details, the schedules of this ADA. We don't have anything to hide here. But I want to put it in the context of say, an employer who is negotiating with the union that representing his employees. While those negotiations are going on, you wouldn't expect either the union or the employer to go public with some of the information that's exchanged during the negotiation. You have to wait till those negotiations are finished, and then both sides will go forward and tell the public or tell the employees what the agreement is. So the danger here with releasing this information is that some of this information may not be either correct in the end, may not be correct, may not be valid, or may be subject to change. And we don't want to mislead the public, but it's most important to bear in mind that our stance here is based on the fact that we are in a negotiation, and you do not release details of your negotiation while you're in the negotiation. So that's the reason we are doing what we're doing.
Minister, as you being a past member of the Public Accounts Committee, how do you feel about the no-show of government representative yesterday?
Well, while I was chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, there were a number of occasions when we did not have a quorum. So it's not that unusual. I can understand it. It may be frustrating, but it's not that unusual.
One of the things that was mentioned during the impromptu press conference at the end of the PAC session was that the OBA had requested a private meeting of the PAC to discuss the summons.
Yes.
Why hold that in private? Why not make that a public meeting as well?
The Public Accounts Committee is quite entitled to have private meetings as well as public meetings. It's at their discretion. When I was chair of the Public Accounts Committee, we had lots of private meetings. Most of them were to determine what course of action and what strategy we would take in the public meetings. But also, very often you have private meetings just to go over data. There's nothing sinister about that, but if they wanted to discuss whether or not they were going to issue this summons, I would have thought the best way to do that would be in a private meeting.
Does it alarm you, sir, that this is becoming a political football?
It is alarming, and let me say that. The structure of a Public Accounts Committee is that it is a bipartisan committee, and people are supposed to put aside their political cloak, if you like, and examine government affairs for the to seek the governance aspects, as well as to ensure or try to ensure from an oversight basis whether the people of Bermuda are getting value for money. The problem here is that you have a chairman who is issuing a summons without the approval of the committee. So if the chairman goes off and issues a summons without the approval of a committee, it goes from being a bipartisan and oversight effort into a possibility of a political witch hunt. And in view of that gentleman's already expressed opposition to this project, well, you can easily come to that conclusion. So it is vital that anything that the Public Accounts Committee does it with the agreement of the members. And that didn't happen in this case.
Then why not attend and make the point there instead of waiting the day and calling a press conference?
Well, another thing I can tell you, I got back yesterday. So, though, you know, I wasn't going to send my financial secretary into a meeting where he would be grilled on something that was not valid.
But if the summons was invalid, then he could have made that point before he actually...
No, if the summons is invalid, he shouldn't be there. He's a senior government official, and he should not respond to summonses that are not valid.